Hey everyone, I'm His Darkest Fear, and this is the first installment of my Cobalt Editor tutorial series. We're going over the basics today in tile manipulation and navigating the editor. To get started, you'll just want to open up Steam and launch the editor from there. If you have a desktop shortcut, you won't get this pop-up. Click play and give it some time. So if everything goes properly, it should open up either the last map you had open, or a new map with just a starting tile and actor. Now if you do have a problem, you can head over to File Explorer, and under Documents, Cobalt, you can open up the Daisy Moon config, that's the name of the engine for the editor, and it should look something like this. So you can change your screen resolution and enable or disable full screen. And that should fix most of your issues if you're having resolution issues. Now back to the editor, I'm just going to make a new map. I'm just going to make the settings identical to what it would normally choose if you don't have a previous map open, which is outdoors and normal. And I'll cover more of these themes in a later video. Alright, so here we've got our actor and our tile. Now let's go over some ways to move the camera around. You can scroll with your mouse to zoom in and out, push the edges of your screen to move, and if you are not exactly keen on moving your mouse all the way to the edge, or you want some finer control, you can hold in the space bar. And this will let you hold in left click and then move the mouse to drag your view around, or hold in right click and move your mouse to fly the view around. You can also scroll to switch layers in this mode, and we'll cover layers in a second. So for now, we're going to scroll to the layer called Collision and use that. Let's get started with some tiles. We can go up to Tiles and Tile Browser, or just press T. Quite easy to remember. And we have lists of different tile sets here on the left. For the purpose of this tutorial, we'll go to boxes, because these are all just solid boxes you can build with. And let's choose just a basic square one. So after you choose it, it'll automatically close, as you just saw. You can left click to place, right click to destroy, and right click again to discard your tile. So we'll choose another tile now that we've discarded it and we still want to build with it. So place a few down, and similar to most editors and whatnot, you're able to select tiles either by dragging your mouse or by holding Shift and clicking separate tiles. And you can also choose a tile by double clicking on it, and that's just the same as choosing it from the tile browser. So now we'll go over a few manipulation options for your tiles. You can hold in A and scroll to change the angle of the tile. You can hold in S and scroll to change the scale of the tile. You can press F to flip the tile. And then also, you can hold in Q to change the size of the grid. Hold in W to change the scale snapping. So if you choose 1 to 1 and I scale it, it'll go from 1 to 2 to 3. You can change the angle snapping, so you can make this very small if you want to. And you can also enable and disable these little snapping options in the corner by holding Shift and pressing Q, W, or E respectively. Now, if you press 1 on your keyboard, or hold it, sorry, you can choose to enable and disable mirroring for your map. I've personally never used this, and I've made a lot of maps, but hey, if you want to, go right ahead. So you can mirror on the Y if you want to. X, you get the idea. We'll set it back to normal. You can also press Shift 1, and it'll add its own little menu in the corner. Now you can also use X and C to see alternate versions of your tile. In this case, before you place it, you can hold in X and choose a square, a ramp, or a rectangle, and hovering over it will then show you multiples of that shape. You can also hold in C and it'll show you the multiples again without asking you to change the actual shape itself. And after you've placed it, you can select it with your mouse and use C to change the style of the tile. And again, you can find these in the tile browser. You don't need to use the shortcut. Or you can hold X, and sometimes that'll give you more options. Most of the time, I've found it's an overload. Some tiles will just give you way too many. It just fills the wheel. Now, real quick, we can test our map out by pressing F5. If you have deleted this actor here, the playable one, you can go into the tile set called Special down here, and you can grab the metal face, and that's just your playable character. So we'll press F5, and you'll have full control over your character, as you would in the game, and you can collide with your tiles and whatnot. And then when you're done testing, you can press F7 to go back. So like I was saying earlier, you can change layers by holding space and scrolling. If you scroll upwards, it'll choose layers that are further away from the current one. And if you scroll downwards, it'll choose ones that are closer to yourself. You can also use arrow keys up and down, same as scrolling up and down. Or you can hold in Z to see the layers, or press L to toggle a layer list. Now there's a few types of layers. We've got collision layers, obviously, and that's what we've been building on here. You can also go back to invisible physics, and this is a collision layer, but you'll never see the tiles in it when you're playing the game. So for instance, we could place a box down, and if we test the game out, that box is there, but we can't see it. Go back even further, we've got collision background. So this is just a collision layer that's behind your character. So particles or your feet or whatnot might be seen just slightly hanging over the edge. And if you go back further, we've got the attached background. And this is sort of like the opposite of invisible physics. It's behind your character, but you can see it and you can't collide with it. You'll just walk right through. Go further back, you've got close background. And these layers that have things like close, near, far, they're all parallax layers. So as you move the camera, it'll move at a different rate than your collision layers will. And so these are just naturally great for backgrounds, especially in outdoors maps. And so that goes all the way back to distant background, where the effect is most visible. Now if you go far enough back, you'll go to the horizon layers, and you'll see that it switches from the tile selector to the scenery selector. Now I'm going to cover these in the next tutorial, so we're just going to go back to our collision layer for now, and we can press escape to go back to the tile selector. Now if you change layers to go closer to yourself, you've got the attached foreground layer. And just like background, you don't collide with this, but it is in front of your character. So you can cover your character up, and you can still walk right through it. And then you've got your parallax layers as well. Now it's worth noting that not all tiles in the editor are collidable, even if you place them in a collision layer. So let's find a good example here. You've got all sorts of little devices and lights and whatnot, and we'll cover these in other tutorials. We'll use a pipe here as an example, because I know this pipe doesn't have a collider to it, so even though you place it on the collision layer, you're going to walk right through it. And so if you're placing decoration on a collision layer, then let's say you want this behind the player, you could put this in collision background. And a good way to check in the editor if something has a collider or not is to switch the render mode. And you can do this by either holding in R, or you can do Shift R, and it'll give you a nice dockable here. So if you switch to a mode like All, or All and Layer, you'll see it adds white lines, and these are the colliders of each object. And this is really easy to see with certain tiles. If you go to grass, for instance, you see they've got these rounded edges on the colliders. And so if you were trying to line up, say, 2 grass tiles colliders, you can line the circles up. And then you know that if you go over it, your character isn't going to look like he suddenly walks up a little ramp and falls down off of it. And that's about it for the tile manipulation tutorial. You can do Control S to save. And you'll see that the maps that I've got here have prefixes in them. For now, we don't need to worry about that. You could name this whatever you want. But you can also do this with File, Save, or Save As, of course. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. We'll be covering some different brush-related tools for coloring tiles, manipulating the horizon layers, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll also cover changing the colors of a layer.